Hi everybody, today's recipe is a really quick and easy frying pan pizza. It doesn't need any yeast, it doesn't need time for the dough to prove, and you can have it on the table in 10 to 15 minutes. I've got kids at home, they're always hungry and they love pizza, so this was a really easy recipe that they can do or I can do to have lunch on the table in minutes. We're going to start with the tomato sauce that goes on any pizza, and it's always useful to have some of this in the fridge. All it is olive oil, tin of tomatoes, mixed herbs and some salt. The important thing when you're making a sauce for the top of pizzas is to make sure it's as dry as possible. Sometimes people use tomato puree, but I find that quite bitter. So I think this is a really good easy sauce to make. So I've just put some olive oil in the pan. It's probably about a tablespoon. The taste of olive oil is lovely in this recipe, and you can hear them sizzling when they go in. I'm going to put a couple of nice big pinches of salt. There we are. And then I'm going to put another few pinches of mixed herbs. Anything you've got will do the job. Oregano is really nice because that tastes really pizza-y and it's really easy to grow. And if you plant it in a pot this year, you'll have it for years and years to come. It doesn't die like basil, which is quite a soft herb and quite hard to grow. So then I'm just going to give it a good push down, just to get it nice and smooth. And I'm just going to cook it down till it goes really quite dry. So we're trying to get rid of all this liquid, because when we put our pizza sauce onto the dough, the more liquid it is, the less crispy and the more doughy you'll get your pizza. So if you want a nice crispy base, cook out your sauce and get it really, really thick and concentrated. If your tomatoes are quite acidic, so have a taste, then you can always add a pinch of sugar as well. There we go. So I'm just going to let that cook away. Okay, so now we're going to get on with our base. So I've got just a normal size mug here, and I've got two types of flour, but if you've only got plain flour, it's absolutely fine, or self-raising flour will work as well, you just won't add the baking powder. So I've got just under a mug of plain flour, and then I'm going to do about a third of a mug of wholemeal flour into the bowl. So that's the flours added. So it was a whole mug of plain flour and a third of a mug of the wholemeal flour. And again, you can just use one type of flour if that's what you've got. I'm going to add a teaspoon of baking powder. If you've used self-raising, you wouldn't add that. And I'm just going to give that a quick stir around to get everything combined. Now we're going to make a hole in the middle, and we're going to add our egg. So we've got one egg. So this is kind of like a scone type recipe. So you can use this to make scones, or you could make some nice flatbreads out of this. So it's quite a versatile recipe. I'm going to add a big dollop of yogurt. So mine's about a couple of dessert spoons of yogurt. As you can see, I'm not that bothered about amounts of things, because it will be on the texture of the dough when you're finished. So what we'll do, when we add our water at the end, that will be when we sort of think about how sticky we want our dough. So I'm just going to add some cheese. It's going to end up about a handful of grated cheese. So I'm estimating it, but you could grate it onto a plate and then sprinkle it in, especially if you're doing it with little hands and you're doing it with children, then that's quite a nice job for them to do. So we've got everything now in our bowl except our salt, which I'm going to add. And I'm going to add a little bit of mixed herbs just so that the base tastes pizza-y. Because obviously this dough isn't a traditional pizza dough, so I want it to taste as much like a pizza as possible. So we've got this all in our bowl, and I'm just going to give it a stir round. And you'll end up with quite a sort of a rough, dry mess at this stage. So this is when we're going to add our water in. So we've got a kind of shaggy, messy sort of dough. And the good thing about pizza dough is you want it to be a little bit chewy. So the more you work it, the more you're working the gluten, which is a protein in the flour, the more chewy you're going to get. So you can get, if you're doing it with children, get them to get their hands in there and really, really scrunch it up, scrunch the dough up, really work with the dough. So we've got this sticky mess, and I'm just going to go and get some water to add. Okay, so I've got some water in my mug, and I'm just going to add it a tablespoon at a time. So I'm going to start with a couple of tablespoons. I'm going to get my hands in there and see what the dough feels like. You want the dough to be quite firm and not sticky. There we are. So I think 2 tablespoons was plenty there. So I've got my dough and I'm going to just sprinkle some flour on my hands and I'm going to just work the dough a little bit. And again, that is just so that we can get the protein strands, the gluten in the dough to make it a little bit chewier. If you were making a scone, you'd be very delicate with your mixture now because you wouldn't want your scones to be hard and rubbery. I'm making it sound really attractive, aren't I? But it is what you want from a pizza dough. So there we go. We've got a lovely ball of dough and it smells lovely because it's got its herbs in it, it's got some cheese in it. And if you want to just have a look over here, our tomato sauce is really cooking down. Now you can see when I stir it, you can actually see the base of the pan. And we're going to be a bit daring and we're going to go a little bit further than that. And whatever you have left after the pizza, you can add into soups, stews, anything that would have tomato puree in it, and it'll give it a really, really good taste because it's obviously a concentrated Italian tomato flavour. So I've got my board here and I'm going to sprinkle some flour on my board, and this is quite a fun job to do. So it's like it's snowing. And I'm going to put my dough on and I'm going to roll it out to about the width of my frying pan. I'm going to use another frying pan for this. It's going to be a non-stick frying pan. And remember, it's got the baking powder in it, so it will puff up. And you can cut this pizza into about 4 nice quarters with some salad on the side. So it'll feed 4 of you for lunch, maybe only 2 for dinner. So there we are, we've got a nice round of pizza base. Okay, so I've got another frying pan on, and it's on, I think, it's hard to tell when it's a camping stove, but I've got it on a kind of, I think I've got it on the highest heat actually, but it doesn't go that high, so it's probably a medium heat. I'm putting a bit of oil in the pan, and I'm going to make sure it coats the base of the pan. Always make sure your pan is hot before you add oil to it, because the metal in the pan will expand a bit, so it kind of the oil coats it once it's sort of expanded. So I've got my oil here, it's nice and hot. I can hold my hand here, but I can feel that it's nice and hot. And I've got my pizza base, which I'm going to carefully pop in the pan, and I'm going to just pop it into the corners here. And the good thing about this recipe is if you cook a little bit, not a lot, if you cook a little bit, then actually, other than flour at the moment, because it's reasonably hard to get, everything else people generally have in the house. They generally will have some oil, they'll have a tin of tomatoes, they'll have some flour, an egg, some cheese. In the pizza base, if you don't have yogurt, you could always add a little bit of curdled milk. And to curdle the milk, you just heat your milk on the stove. So I would heat probably 1/3 of a cup of milk on the stove and add a squeeze of lemon juice, and it'll sort of separate a bit like yogurt. So you could do that if you didn't have yogurt in the house. So I really want this to be a recipe that anyone can do, that you can come down to your kitchen, say, I'm starving, but I really want something hot and I want something tasty. I don't just want a sandwich. And you can make this with what you've got in the house. So it's sitting in the pan, it's going nice and brown underneath. And I'm just going to pop some of the tomato sauce on top. You can see the tomato sauce is not watery at all anymore. It's nice and thick, and it'll be really tasty. So I'm doing that on top. You can add now whatever toppings you want. I made one last week for the boys, and I had some cooked cold bacon that somebody hadn't eaten, and I had a tin of sweet corn, so I put that over the top, and I grated my cheese on top. We're just going to use cheddar on top. If you had some mozzarella in the house, you can use that, because obviously that's a bit more, it's what you would sort of think about when you think about pizzas, but the cheddar cheese tastes just as nice and it melts really, really well. So that is our pizza well on its way. So I'm going to have a little look now underneath, and I'm going to see if it's starting to cook. So I'm just going to push it down around the edges here, and it's moving about, so it's not sticking, and I can hear that it's created a bit of a crust on the bottom. So I'm going to have a little peek. Can you see that? So it's nice and brown underneath. And you can see it started to puff up around the edges. So I'm going to give it a couple more minutes in the pan while I tidy up my things, and I'm going to preheat my grill because it's going to finish off under the grill to melt all the cheese. So I'm just going to do a little bit of tidying up while I wait for the pizza to have a little bit longer in the pan. Okay, so this has been cooking now for about 3 or 4 minutes, and you can see the underneath has gone quite nice and toasty brown. You can hear that it's cooked. So I'm going to take it over and I'm going to pop it under my preheated grill, and I'm going to melt the cheese on top, and then I'll show you the finished product. Okay, so this is our finished pizza. It's been under the grill a few minutes. You can see it's got a lovely golden base and the cheese is melted on top. I'm just going to chop it up. And when I did it last week for the boys, they said it tasted like those French bread pizzas that you get. So it definitely got the thumbs up. So there we are. I've got a nice wedge of pizza, and I'm going to serve it with a big handful of leaves. If you want to do anything for yourself during this time to feel well, to feel healthy, and especially to help your mental health, is eat a handful or 2 of greens a day. It contains so many elements that we can talk about at another time that you need for your mental health to feel good. So if any greens you can get hold of at the moment, and these are great, these packs, because they'll have a mixture of, I think this one's got lamb's lettuce and it's got red chard and it's also got some beetroot in it. So it's got a really nice mix of greens that you need. So I might dress that now with a little bit of olive oil, and if I had it, a squeeze of lemon and maybe a pinch of salt. But there we go. That's a really nice, healthy, quick and easy lunch to have during lockdown. I hope you try this, give this recipe a try, and remember that the dough can be used with any other toppings. So you could do it with pesto if you had some pesto in the house. It could be done and just served as dips if you had some hummus, or you had some if you wanted to, because it's got the cheese in it, so if you wanted to cut it into fingers, fry it in the pan and turn it over, cut it into fingers, and you could serve it with some different cheese and some carrot sticks and some cucumber sticks. So I really hope you enjoy this recipe.